All right. So the sorry, I'm getting my screen. The topic we're going to dive into and is balancing hormones naturally. We get a lot of questions about this, and it's sometimes we overcomplicate things, and or maybe search for things to hack the system, right? I think nowadays sometimes we're in a instant gratification component. Obviously, uh, this has been something, that's kind of been taught in society, specifically with if you're close enough and have Amazon, you can order something and have it the next day. That's just, the instant gratification component. But with the understanding of hormones and balanced hormones naturally, there's a process, and there's a multitude of things that can impact hormones. Because I'm going to touch on male hormones as well, both. It's not a this or that, but um, I will say as we go through, I'll kind of touch a little bit more on male hormones, just based upon it's something that needs addressed as well, and it's probably not getting enough attention. You'll see it change here in the future. I'm hoping some of the regulations come off uh, with testosterone because it got a bad rap. So that's a topic I'll touch a little bit on as we. So with that said, so what I'm going to talk about is obviously balancing hormones naturally, and I'm going to give you guys some general understanding and education on um, the process, what are hormones, things of that nature. So obviously it's a hot topic across the board. Again, it's not a male or female thing. It's a combination because I'm working with gentlemen right now who have some dysfunction going on with the male hormones. So uh, with that said, hormones are chemical messengers that coordinate communication between organs and tissue. Sounds pretty simple, for the most part. Yeah, it's very complicated and can be very complicated. Uh, they regulate metabolism, energy production, muscle growth, fat storage, libido, mood, sleep, and recovery. Obviously, that's a big deal. Uh, even a little bit of dysfunction can create the system and create issues with the system. I've personally have been through this myself, and I had some dysfunction in one area of the system, and it kind of messed the whole system up. And luckily, I had the ability to kind of fine tune the system, and it's working much better now. So balanced hormones are going to create more of clarity, strength, resilience, metabolic efficiency, really, because this is where as our hormones change, male and or female, uh, we start noticing it in energy. Some of the you call it, some people suffer from brain fog, lethargic, and I would even go into symptoms such as depression is a big factor in a imbalance in hormones. I think a lot of guys probably kind of push this off to the side, but it's a big thing with that response in males as well, and across the board in females. So. And then obviously we see changes in our metabolic process. Maybe nothing has changed and we started putting on more percentage of body fat, or our percentage of body fat changes. Those are all can be signs. They can create fatigue, obviously brain fog, weight gain, mood, instability, and poor recovery. Interesting part. I was a couple years ago. I was listening to I think it was a Dr. Huberman podcast, and he had a if it wasn't him, it was Andy Frisella. But anyway, they had a gentleman on who had worked with veterans, and he was an advocate of working with veterans coming back from obviously stress, traumatic components, because the addiction aspect and recovery aspect was pretty rough on those gentlemen. And it's called Operator Syndrome is the name of the book, and I cannot remember the author or the gentleman who I'm talking about, but if I find it, I'll dump it down in the chat. But anyway, he worked with these veterans and was able to identify that they had a hormonal imbalance, and that's why a lot of the dysfunction was happening with these gentlemen, because they were coming back from these stressful situations and their hormones were really off and it was causing depression-like symptoms. So he was able to manipulate their hormones, fix some of their testosterone, and he had a protocol where he was really helping veterans come back and become healthy again. But anyway, that's just one example of what the where the mental health can be impacted from the hormonal response. And then maybe we're labeled something that really is not the root cause. So these are just the core ones. Obviously, there's more. There's a multitude of hormones. These are the ones that we're going to touch on and talk about because these are the ones that we see most often impact health, how you feel, recovery, lean tissue, all those components I just went through. So the one of the main factoring hormones that is impact of health is insulin. Obviously, it's going to regulate your blood sugar and fat storage, and that's that can be a really game changer for most people. We get the insulin response working and functioning properly. Cortisol is the next one, controls stress response and inflammation. Again, we all know and it probably had a lot of conversations about thyroid hormone regulation. It's more of a metabolic rate and a temperature component. And then we get into the ones that are more common when somebody says hormones, they go to more of these, and that would be testosterone, estrogen. These are going to be the ones that regulate, the muscle component, libido, your cognitive aspect, and body composition. And then we jump over into progesterone supports more the supports nervous system balance, sleep quality, and that's a big deal. And that we see more impactful, obviously, for women. And then we jump down into the other one, growth hormone. It's going to be the main component that drives repair, tissue regeneration, and then fat metabolism. So they go deeper than this. These are the core ones that we're going to touch on today because in our programs, we really work to address a multitude of the hormonal responses. And here's some signs that sometimes we negate. We kind of look the other ways until it becomes an issue for us. So low morning energy, depending on caffeine, you see a change in percentage of body fat, more specifically around your belly area, and that could be different for each person based upon genetics is where you carry that, but midsection area, low libido, reduced performance, brain fog, poor focus, mood swings and irritability, poor sleep quality, slow recovery from training. So it's like, obviously some of us can check some of these off and it may not even be hormones. It just may be some of the components we're dealing with from a stress standpoint, from a sleep standpoint, from a production standpoint. But you want to be aware in monitoring these components because many times what happens is we negate it. We like, oh, I'm just, I just didn't sleep well. And then it starts compounding, a year after year after year. And that's when we can start getting into a little bit of issue with where our hormonal components are operating. So here's just some of the root causes of the disruption. And again, these are ones that we talk about and obviously try to address most of these with you guys in the program. So chronic stress is a big one. And this is one that each person is going to be a little bit different how they respond to stress. And it's going to be a chronic stress is very debilitating. It really takes a toll on a system. Elevates cortisol, suppresses all the sex hormones. So, and I'll talk a little bit about obviously the ability to regulate stress responses here later. Blood sugar instability increases insulin resistance and your fat oxidation, energy levels. There's a lot that goes into blood sugar instability and how it's operating. So, that's obviously that's pretty common component that we try to address across all health. And obviously with diabetes and things of that nature, obviously the GLP-1 is a tool to help with that. So sleep deprivation reduces anabolic hormone production. So the growth hormone's really impacted with uh, with sleep or the lack of sleep, and there's a multitude that are impacted by sleep. Um, Micronutrient deficiencies impair hormone pathways. So if we don't have those communication pathways or the ability for those pathways to communicate properly, deficiencies, that area is more of a fine-tune testing that you can go a little bit deeper into your micronutrient deficiencies. Aaron and I again went through this past year. Obviously, it gets a little bit more expensive in a testing protocol, but there's some general supplementation that I will touch on that's general that help maybe cover some of the deficiencies we see in most people. So, inflammation reduces hormone receptor sensitivity. So if we're inflamed, again, the system just not going to operate very well. And then, some of these things are compounding. Then we get into excessive visceral fat. So a lot of these symptoms or root causes can cause excess adipose tissue. And then it kind of becomes a compounding component. That's why it's so important with men and women is identifying percentage of body fat and maneuvering our percentage of body fat in a better direction because it impacts all the systems in some format. So excess visceral fat increases inflammatory load and hormonal conversion, whether it's estrogen or progesterone. For men, they may have a little bit more estrogen production based upon percentage of body fat. So again, we're going to come back to lifestyle determines hormonal output. And I will say this, obviously more and more research is coming out about environmental impact. The air, the water, the pollutants that we're exposed to on a daily basis has a big impact as well. I didn't put that on there, but that's a whole nother component you can go do, or we can give you more access to. So, our a lot of our system and program, specifically because gone through these things from her own health issues, is we put together, obviously our system, and a lot of this is going to correlate. So there's going to be five pillars of natural hormonal balance. Uh, Pillar one, and it's a big one because across the board, it helps with how the system functions, is stabilizing blood sugar. That's an important one because your blood sugar swing, it's going to disrupt your insulin response, cortisol, testosterone, estrogen balance. So it kind of throws off the whole system. So if we see spikes, it promotes fat storage and hormonal suppression. That's what I was talking about earlier about fat oxidation, and with obviously these latest GLP-1s, they help with stimulating fat oxidation, which is a big deal because it's just going to help get the excess fat to be utilized as a fuel source. Now, obviously, you have to be in a caloric deficit and do all the other things, and it is just going to be an accelerator. Here's another thing we do is obviously we coach you guys on protein because that's going to be a big factor in stabilizing blood sugar response. So again, 30 to 50 grams of protein per meal. Some of you guys may not be quite up to that marker point. Again, this is just general. If you're slightly under, it kind of depends on the person and obviously caloric consumption. And then what you can do is obviously pair carbohydrates with fiber and healthy fats and protein. So that way you don't have those blood sugar swings or disruptions. So it kind of stabilizes the whole system. So that way we don't have those peaks and valleys. So you want to try to minimize, avoid, if you can, I would say minimize liquid calories and refined sugars, because again, those are going to cause some problems with the disruption of blood sugar. Weight training on a consistent basis stabilizes blood sugar as well. It's one of those things where just by incorporating consistent resistance training, your insulin response becomes better because lean tissue is a big indicator of that. Walking um, helps in a multitude. Obviously, post meal, could get you moving around. Just a nice, easy walk brings your stress response down as well. So stable blood sugar, we work on that, and it's done in a multitude of ways. It's going to help with stabilizing your hormones signaling. So again, we're trying to keep the system communicating and firing and working more efficiently for you. And then again, pillar two, strength training. Muscle is going to improve insulin sensitivity and glucose disposal, which is big. Again, what we've seen is if somebody starts to lose too much lean tissue, and then obviously the conversion of percentage of body fat goes up, it gets a little bit more challenging to get the hormones to respond to or respond as well. So some of the foundational pillars that I'm going through today are ones that we address in our program, but we want to reinforce that. And then obviously using other stimulation, other nutrients, other things outside of once you get the foundational components in place. So, and resistance training also increases testosterone and growth hormone, which is important. Again, I went through both those components. Obviously, with both male and female, as we age, the testosterone production starts to drop. Lean tissue can help keep that level more natural. Sometimes obviously other components have to come in, and that's where the hormone therapy comes in. Again, growth hormone stimulation is important as well. It's going to help with the connective tissue and visceral fat. Strength training also improves thyroid conversion efficiency, reduces synthetic inflammation. So there's a natural, and I'll go off topic just a little bit. There's a natural response from the core temperature from muscle contraction. Heat shock protein is affected, which will pull down your natural inflammatory response in the body. So people who work out on a consistent basis have lower inflammation than people who don't. Another way to help stimulate that heat shock protein is traditional saunas, and you want to get them up to about 180, 190 for about 20 minutes, and that's a good tool to use if you have access to it to help the natural inflammatory response. So those are just some hacks, I think. But the one resistance training is shown to pull it back, but the sauna obviously will help as well. And then as we improve our body composition with enhanced hormonal balance, so it helps stabilize your system. And when we're able to pour a percentage of body fat down, the system's going to function better. And if we're able to keep that lean tissue, again, the system is going to function more efficiently. Obviously, you guys have your own protocol, 3 to 4 days a week, minimum 3 days a week of progressive overload is going to be key for longevity and or stabilizing your hormones in general. Again, sleep. Some of you may track your sleep. We have the Oura Ring. It's interesting. I just pulled data points from a whole year last year, and through them, I did a big chat GPT on myself with all my data points and just looked at where I'm at. I still struggle a little bit with some of my deep sleep, but you can monitor and track your sleep. And if you do, I know some of you guys had some issues with uh, attaching your Aura into this app. If you are, let me know. It should work. You should be able to put /Aura, and it'll give you a link to attach your Aura Ring to our software. It should. If you have issues with that, let me know. Um, so you can track your sleep, and I think it's important to do so because it's one of those areas that impacts our health and our hormonal um, health as well. So when you're deprived of sleep, what happens? Your cortisol and insulin, your cortisol is impacted and your insulin sensitivity, you're more insulin resistant when you have when you're sleep deprived. Less than 6 hours reduces testosterone output significantly. Obviously, in a perfect world, we're all getting, 7 to 9. I wish, I work on it, but some nights I do, some nights I don't. Again, you want to create a good environment for quality sleep. Dark, cool room between 60 and 67 degrees. If you can try to cut out your screen time before bed, because again, this is stimulation. And then kind of keep in pattern with your circadian rhythm. There's some tools out there that you can track this as well. Once you start getting those data points of when you go to bed, how fast it takes, so the latency time, and once you start having all those data points, your software, if you have a Oura Ring or whatever software you have, it'll start letting you know here's when your natural circadian rhythm is. So it's time to go to bed. And I would say in with sleep, try to stay consistent through the weekends as much as possible because that's when a lot of people get really thrown off. If they stay up too late, then it just throws the whole system off a little bit. So if you can stay in rhythmic pattern, it's always going to be a bonus for you. And then we move over into, again, stress management. Chronic stress keeps the body in fight or flight. Most of the stress, not all, I'm going to put asterisks around it, not all, but most of the stress is a mental component we create ourselves. Being able to disassociate or look at certain situations with a different lens can be a big deal for you because sometimes if we step back and really evaluate the situation, we're creating way too much stress than we really need to take on. So, if you struggle in this area, so I will give you some, obviously some tips and things that can help. But I'm going to talk about elevated cortisol suppresses. Again, it's going to suppress your testosterone. It's going to suppress progesterone and thyroid. All of them are going to be impacted by stress. How you can help with stress response. If any of you have been exposed to breath work, that is a tool we have, and it's natural. It's our ability to breathe in a certain rhythmic pattern. I think some of our training modules have them in there. The diaphragmatic breathing, the Wim Hof breathing, the box breathing. That is a great tool that most of us don't utilize enough of. And if you, just like riding your bike, if you practice it enough, your ability to go back into get out of fight or flight becomes very, very, very good, and you can do it very quickly just by utilizing proper breathing techniques. So, I would recommend if you haven't, let us know. We can throw some other resources. Again, our training modules have some resources in there. But breath work or breathing is one of the best tools for stress management. So, and then you can look around your local communities. You may find a instructor who does breath work, and it's been a great experience. Aaron and I have both utilized that as a tool as well. I got into the Wim Hof and the code exposure, and it teaches you how to pull yourself out of fight or flight instantly. So again, it's a great tool. We just don't utilize it because it's free. Sometimes, the best tools are free. So, breath work, morning sunlight, again, anchors your circadian rhythm. Cold exposure, that's a tool. We have a cold plunge, and I don't necessarily use it for the inflammatory inflammation responses. It's more for training your central nervous system. So that way I have more control over the fight or flight. Because when you get into the cold plunge, your body obviously thinks it's in harm's way and thinks it's going to die. So you instantly go into fight or flight. And then you have to use your breath to pull yourself back out of fight or flight into so sympathetic, parasympathetic, the nervous system pathways. So And then, obviously we manipulate you guys' training loads. So we strategically, sometimes you're going to have deload weeks or a different format of training to kind of pull some of that mechanical stress off of you. So, and then daily walking lowers sympathetic dominance. You know, and grounding is another one. I didn't put it on here. I know some people would think you're kind of out there, but grounding is another one. Walking barefoot. It's has an inflammatory, and it has shown to pull down the inflammatory response as well. And then with that is number five is going to be reduced inflammation, right? So inflammation disrupts insulin signaling and thyroid conversion. So the interesting part with me is I had Hashimoto's, and so my thyroids it was working, but the antibodies they were producing too many antibodies and they were attacking each other. So it was not converting well, and I had to fix that whole system. And high inflammation is gonna reduce hormone receptor sensitivity. So the communication pathways are not going to be as good. So we want to really minimize, or if you can, it's probably more minimize altered processed foods in your daily routines. You can look at omega-3 intake, which I think I'll talk about it, some general supplementation, just general. Interesting part is if you're consuming a good amount of processed foods, they are higher in omega-6 fatty acids. And if you're consuming those higher processed foods and you take omega-3, you may not be absorbing that omega-3 because your body can only absorb X amount of the fat. So what happens is those omega sixes take their spot. So you'd really want to try to reduce your processed foods, and then you would obviously push in your omega-3 essential fatty acids. So another thing that's overlooked many times that is a big impact is gut health. And where is your personal gut health? If there needs to be some more work on that. Never hesitate to utilize this. There are companies out there that will give you specific, protocols for your gut health. And obviously, it's an extra cost, but we've utilized them personally. And if you do suffer from gut health, you want to make sure you're addressing that because there's a lot of different tools out there to help you with that. So obviously, you want to look at, more whole foods, fiber rich. They're going to be beneficial for your gut biome, and then ultimately maintain a healthy percentage of body fat. Because again, if we're carrying excess amounts of body fat, it disrupts our system, and then sometimes the testosterone, estrogen production is off because of the extra adipose tissue. So here, I'm just going to touch on because you can get a little obviously more specific, and that would be more from a testing protocol with supplementation or deficiencies. I'm just going to give you some general ones that we see across the board. So supplements are there to support, but they will not replace the lifestyle. If you take the supplement and you're not addressing the other pillars I just talked about, am I saying you're wasting? Maybe, because it's counterintuitive. So it's not working with, it's working against. Even though you're giving, a supplement to stimulate a certain process, but if all the other components are not within alignment, it's really not doing its job it could. So obviously, I just went through all these, sleep, nutrition, stress, training are all optimized or close enough or better. Focus on foundational nutrition first. Keep supplementation simple and strategic, because you can get into some the micronutrient deficiencies and get testing done on that. So one of the baselines is magnesium. It helps with a lot of chemical reactions within the body, improves sleep. helps with central nervous system recovery, supports testosterone progression production, improves blood sugar control. So again, this is going to be a general component as far as dosing. You guys have seen this, and this has gotten a lot more, from the general practitioners. Now they test this is our vitamin D component, but you want to make sure if you're taking a vitamin D supplementation, it's with a K based upon the absorption rate and utilization. So what it does, it acts like a hormone in the body. So it helps support immune health and sex hormone production. So if you're low in vitamin D, you're typically nowadays your doctor will test for that. That's one of them they started testing for. I wish they would test for more, but that's one of them they will test for. So it's pretty common to have your general practitioner test this, and you can address it and come back, and when you retest, it should be more in the healthy ranges. So low levels linked to fatigue, low mood, obviously bone and cardiovascular function are it helps support those two as well. And then there's some typical dosage across, and again, based upon lab testing with your general prac. This is another one that is a general baseline that everyone can take. Omega-3 fatty acids, we just don't get enough of it in from our natural consumption. So it's going to help with inflammatory response. So pulling your inflammation down, improves cell membrane flexibility, enhances hormone receptor sensitivity. Again, if we're doing all the pillars and we add a couple of these supplements, we're just trying to set up a better environment for our system to function as good as it can through this aging process. And supports cognitive function and mood stability, dose 200 to 300 mg. So when you do the omega-3 fatty acids, you want an EPA and DHE or DHA, that combination. If you guys want more information, just let us know on those. And then we pop over into protein and amino acid support. So hormones are built from amino acid building blocks. So adequate protein, adequate amino acids, they're going to help preserve lean muscle mass, improve blood sugar stability. Again, this as a general range, we probably have most of you guys higher than this. So we always going to coach this, use high quality protein supplementation if intake is insufficient, if we're not consuming enough, if we're not hitting our marker points. And then you can use essential amino acids as well. Aaron and I both, I probably use them more than Aaron is, but essential amino acids help with recovery and some other components. I don't have them on here, but that's what the amino acid. You can get that from your consumption of protein supplementation and food consumption. But then you can also get specific essential amino acids in either a pill form or powder form. And then we can jump over. Obviously, some of you guys have already been through this process or communicate with your coach and or your general practitioner when to test. Obviously, when some of these components are showing themselves, unexpected body composition changes, mood instability, or sleep disruption. Um, you know, Obviously, we can get really specific in the testing marker points. The thyroid, fasting insulin, vitamin D, obviously the sex hormones. And then you always want to do more of the testing and understanding before any type of aggressive supplementation and making sure we're addressing the pillar foundations because that's the most important. That's all that's what the foundation is going to be built on. And the interesting part, typically hormones are a mirror. Hormones reflect your habits. They reflect stress load, sleep quality. They reflect body fat percentage. They reflect training volume, recovery. You do not fix hormones. You remove what is disrupting them. And in some degree, yes, we do fix them. But, I wanted to kind of hit on these components because many times this has been a process for us. Just like I went through the process, I had low testosterone, my growth hormone was off, and I was in Hashimoto's. a couple years prior to that, I knew something was off, right? And we had gone through, a construction of a new house we built that we had to sell back to the builder. We had, just as we got our bearings, we went through COVID and they shut us down, running a business, managing people, laying people off. I got it. I went through a really stressful time, and again, that was a reflection of what my body internally had gone through, and it started showing up all across the board in my health and my hormones. you know so it's a reflection, and if we can manage most of these, and or get better in these areas, it's going to reflect internally in how you feel, how your hormones respond. Obviously, we're fighting some of the damage we have done prior. If if some of the hormones need extra attention, it's because some of the neglect over the years. And I would say, sometimes the environmental components, the environmental disruptors have gotten worse over the years as well, and what we've been exposed to. And there's probably some genetic factors that would lay on top of that as well. So again, it's going to be nutrition, lifting, sleep, stress. How do we manage that? And then optimize your body fat. We get you an optimal health range with percentage of body fat, and then we come in with supplementation and the other components, because now we have accessibility to this knowledge of testing and having true data points and true markers to see the things move in the right direction. So, um, obviously, this this topic can go much, much deeper. Uh, I wanted to give you guys a big picture overview of hormones, because I think many times, from our standpoint and practitioner standpoint, with the education we have, we see hormones get miscommunicated, I believe, or there's a misconception of what a hormone is. And I wanted to kind of give a broad overview of this, and some of the foundational components that you guys are working through personally to help reinforce having a good ecosystem. Now you can add in those other components to just accelerate that process, and then managing it for extended period of time, because now we're starting to see and get these tools with peptides that stimulate these hormones to react a certain way. That's when you start looking at, okay, uh, how can I have a better quality of life for longer? So there's a longevity component that would come into play with this. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is kind of open it up and see if you guys have any specific questions for me. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off the share, and see what you guys have for me.
I have a question about
Sure.
sleep. So like last night I had a pretty rough night of sleep, just a little over 6 hours. Um, like getting a nap the next day, does that help balance it? Is that counterproductive? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it it really depends. Like, many times, what we'll see happen is if you have multiple days, or essentially nights of lack of sleep, what will happen is your body will naturally go into a better quality sleep. If even if it happens, so say if you had like you did, you had one not so good night of sleep, and if you didn't take a nap, your body is going to try to not necessarily make up for it, but it's going to try to get that quality of rest the next night. Now, sometimes depending on what we have going on, it gets disrupted again. Interesting part is, with me, I've tracked my sleep and my data points over this last year, and so I struggle with deep sleep. Still don't know why. I think it was my thyroid issue I had, and I would, some nights I would have, very limited deep sleep, and it would go, multiple nights, and then all of a sudden one night it went in and it kind of like made up for itself, which was interesting and intriguing from my standpoint to see that, and no rhyme or reason. Um, I would say just listen to your body as much as you can.
Okay.
If you feel like you need to take a nap, go for it. I don't think it's necessarily, if you rest too long, it may disrupt your
Right.
ability to fall back
Fall back
asleep that
asleep.
night. Yeah.
Yeah. Nope.
So I don't think there's a right or wrong with that. That's very individualized.
Okay.
This is much, but if sometimes if you're very tired, yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to rest and try to catch up a little bit.
Sounds
Yes,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
sleep's tricky. I mean, because each individual is a little bit different with sleep. I think
Yeah.
we take it for granted. Our kids are at the age right now that they're just starting to get into longer sleep cycles. And I'm like, oh, I
Right.
missed that.
For sure. So no, that's good. I typically have I mean, sleep is not difficult for me. I typically get 7 to 8 hours.
That's good.
But I'm feeling it today.
Yeah,
I'm kind of dragging and I'm
yeah.
like, so yeah, even though I've been outside, I've been getting fresh air, I've been getting some steps in this morning, I'm just dragging. So
Yeah, make sure you keep your water intake, push your water intake a little bit. That typically helps because I mean, obviously lack of sleep, you're going to be a little bit lethargic,
yeah.
and a lot of times what happens with that is we will go after a food or a carbohydrate to try to punch that energy because that's I mean that's what we're lacking. So if you can take and stay hydrated, hydration will help with your energy response a little bit.
Okay. Good
Yeah.
point. All righty.
Awesome.
Filling up my water bottle as we speak. I don't know if you could
There you
hear that.
go.
I appreciate it. Thanks,
Yep.
Tony.
Yep. Is there any other questions? I know you guys are going through these journeys on, obviously, with your specific coach and and or practitioner and things of that nature. But I just wanted to give you guys a big picture overview of, you know, how we design this program, and how so many variables can impact your hormones. Well, awesome. Now, if you guys need other resources, never hesitate. We have a plethora. We just try not to overload because there's so much information. But if you have other specific questions on this topic or the topics we obviously present, just let us know, and we can give you other resources. Awesome. Well, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up and um, go ahead and end my recording here. So if you guys again have other questions, hit us up. I appreciate jumping on and learning more about okay, I'll get one come through here. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, no, that's good. Uh, and that's part of the reason I wanted to obviously hit this topic because I'm seeing so many people get kind of confused with hormones and understanding of some of the core foundational components of health and how the core foundational components of health can really impact the hormones and how to set up a better environment for you to be successful with that. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and shut her down. Thank you. You guys have an awesome day. If you guys need anything, never hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Thanks.